Hello and welcome to the next Shell Eco Marathon virtual learning session, our first session in this new season, and a very special welcome back from me to those of you who have joined one of our previous sessions. My name is Norman Koch and I'm the Global General Manager of Shell Eco Marathon. I would like to start off by thanking all of you for the tremendous flexibility and the understanding you have shown as we evolved the Shell Eco Marathon program due to the impact of COVID-19. And as this situation still continues to change, the safety and the health of our Shell Eco Marathon participants, and of course our organizing teams, remains our top priority. I am thrilled to have you all with us today for this very exciting virtual learning session with NASA, all from the safety of your homes. Today, you will be hearing from Lucien Junkin, a robotics engineer at NASA, who is also the chief engineer of the human rovers for the Moon and Mars. Lucien began his career at NASA in 1990 when he joined the newly formed robotics team at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston and has been involved in many extremely exciting projects, and I think we will be hearing about quite a few of them later. And in conversation with Lucien, we have Abigail Harrison, also known as Astronaut Abby, an aspiring astronaut, a Harvard scientist, and the founder of the Mars Generation nonprofit, with a mission to excite and educate kids and adults alike about STEM education and space exploration. So, welcome, Lucien. Welcome, Abby. We are very excited to have you with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you in just a few moments. But I'd like to ensure that session is as interactive as possible for all of us. So if you have any questions for our two panelists throughout the presentation, please go to the website menti.com on your browser and enter the code shown on the screen below. On Menti, you will be able to post your questions, see other questions, and give a thumbs up to those that you think are very important to answer, so they will go up in the queue. If by any chance you have an issue accessing Menti, you can also post your questions on the YouTube comments on the right of the live screen once you've logged into YouTube, of course. So Lucien and Abby will then be answering your questions after the conversation portion of this live stream. As you know, it is a video live stream. So if for any reason we run into technical difficulties, please be patient with us while we fix the problem for you, and we will be back as quickly as we can. So that's all from me for now. And without further ado, Abby, I can already see you're already eager and keen to fire the first question at Lucien. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Norman, and thank you to all of our Shell Eco Marathoners who are joining us for this today, and especially thank you, Lucien. This is going to be, I think, a really fantastic and exciting conversation, and I'm just so excited to get to meet you and say hi.
Thank you very, very much, Abby, for having me. It is super excited to be here with you, Norman, and all the Eco Marathoners.
Okay, so without further ado, we're going to jump into these questions because, like Norman said, I'm very excited to hear from you, Lucien, about your incredible experience. So our first question, and this is a little bit of a long one, so you might want to take notes. No. Our first question is, Lucien, can you tell us about your personal journey to the current role that you're in? How did you wind up at NASA? And what was it that you were doing before this role? And especially, how did your studies prepare you for your career? And can you talk a little bit about what it is that you're actually doing currently at NASA?
Wow, what a journey it's been. Let's just start at the beginning. So I was born in the Apollo era in the 1960s. I grew up in Natchez, Mississippi, which is a small town on the Mississippi River between Mississippi and Louisiana. I had 6 siblings or 5 siblings. There were 6 of us. I was the caboose. I was the youngest. My mother and father, great people. Daddy was in the Army in World War II. Mama held down the home front, so they were part of the greatest generation. Then I went to school. I had fabulous teachers, lots of nuns, good coaches. My 2 high school coaches, I played football and baseball and golf. My 2 high school coaches ended up in the Mississippi State Hall of Fame for coaches. So So really good teachers, good influence on my life. Then I went off and I grew up kind of in the 70s. I was born in the Apollo era. I grew up in the 70s. I remember we had a lot of kind of excitement around not Apollo 11 when Armstrong landed, but kind of in the Apollo 16 era. I remember the stickers all around the house. I really fondly remember kicking the TV to get the picture back because our TV didn't really play well at that time. But so I grew up in the 70s. I was influenced by my brothers and my sister, and I listened to a lot of Beatles. And then during high school, went on, kind of knew what I wanted to do. My mother and father always kind of instilled in us that there are two types of things you can do. You can build and you can serve. And I think as I grew up, I started to want to do kind of both of those things. So I went off to college, went to Mississippi State, studied mechanical engineering, and focused on oil, gas, and chemical, and worked offshore in the Gulf of Mexico and at chemical plants during the summer. So I was well groomed coming out of college. Coach Beasley taught his whole career and coached, and he was my math teacher, and he wanted to be an engineer, and he went into teaching and coaching. So my senior year at Mississippi State, I went back and I asked for my parents' advice. Hey, I want to go off and get a teaching degree and go teach and coach. And I asked my parents, and I asked Coach Beasley and Coach Garcia, and they all had similar things. Lucien, you go off and do engineering for 4 or 5 years. Try to find some opportunities to teach and coach, and then see how that does. It was life-changing advice. So I went off and I went to Olin Chemical. I was making chlorine. I always, like I said, back when I was younger, I kind of had a keen eye on NASA. So eventually, NASA, through networking, some friends said, hey, look, they're starting robotics down at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. So off I went. I got a job with Lockheed, came to the Johnson Space Center, and here I was at the beginning of robotics at the Johnson Space Center. Super exciting time. And soon after, I got involved in Big Brothers and did some service. So now I'm building robots and doing service. It was like a dream. And then one thing led to another. We started Robonaut back in the humanoid back in the early 90s. So I was involved in that. And then President Bush said, hey, we're going back to the moon by 2020, and we need the assets to do that. So we knew that we were going to need rovers on the moon that could be operated from Earth. So they tapped on the robotics division to start developing those. And that's when I got super involved in rovers, and being from Mississippi, I had some off-roading background. So that was exciting time to do rovers. And then the years have just ticked by. And then in 96, 97, there was a real life-changing moment. We brought a robotics team, our first robotics team, Team 118, the Robonauts. We started it at the Johnson Space Center, and that was we're building our 26th robot. So we have 60 students on a team building robots every year. So I build robots, I mentor, which is super satisfying. And now today we are building up the LTV, the Lunar Terrain Vehicle, for the moon for the Artemis project. So super exciting. That's how I got here. It was a long journey.
And what an exciting and incredible personal story that's led you into this fantastic career that you're a part of. Speaking of the return to the moon, which is a topic that many of us are really excited about in this generation and others, my dream is actually to be an astronaut and to work at NASA as well. And I think that all of our SEM students are interested in how to apply their studies to their careers, and where they can use that then to make a difference. So what advice would you give to someone like me or our SEM students in terms of using their studies or exploring what careers might be best for them?
So I really, this is kind of how I do it with Casey and Billy, my children, and how I mentor the students. The best advice is to always have kind of that plan B. It doesn't really matter whether you're building an eco marathon vehicle or a robot or living life. While you're developing something or while you're going to school, if you have a kind of like, if this doesn't work out, what will I do? What will I do next? It kind of eases how you do things. So as you do design work on your, let's take a brake system for the eco marathon, and you're nervous whether it's going to meet the 20-degree slope test and all of that, then have kind of like be planning a backup plan while you have some spare time. And so if it doesn't work, then you're always in this plan B and plan C. We always hope that plan A works, but we all have to adjust to whatever's thrown our way. So that would be my advice, is to kind of go through life, take some extra college courses that you have an interest in, and kind of be a diversified person and be able to pursue your dreams as they come. But really don't lose your dreams. Just keep kind of chipping away with it. Look, I didn't even know what my dream was. There wasn't even a computer back in the 1970s when I was growing up. And then computers came along in the 80s. Things happened. Robotics, you didn't even know what a robot was in the 70s. And now look, so pursue your dreams, and I think everything will work out okay for people.
Absolutely, and that's such an incredible thing to think about, what kinds of opportunities and dreams might be available for our Shell Eco Marathoners in the future that don't even currently exist. I also love what you say about how important it is to have a plan B, not just in engineering and space exploration, but also within your own life. So our next question, Lucien, is what can we learn from your work on electric mobility in space, and how can we apply that e-mobility here on Earth? And in particular, what are the specific and unique challenges to extraterrestrial electric mobility, and which of those challenges are common to here on Earth as well?
Okay. If we have a couple days, I'll answer this question. Let's just try to sum it down into something. So for the eco marathoners, you know all about your subsystems, you know about your propulsion, your steering, your braking system, everything. On rovers for the moon, we have the same similar subsystems. We have to have motor controllers. We have to have a power source. We have to have, like you have a bulkhead between your batteries, your power, and your human. We do the same thing. We have protection between that. Where the environment gets difficult, like for the moon, is the fact that there's no atmosphere. If you kind of appreciate what's going on in the moon and understand the environment, there are a few things going on that are much different. So gravity is much different on the moon. So 1/6 of what it is here on Earth. The equatorial, if you're at the equatorial regions like we did on Apollo, you have 14 Earth days of sunlight, 14 Earth days of darkness. If you're at the poles where we're going with the Artemis, you have similar swings in dark and light, but you can stick a solar array up way high to get electricity. But let's just talk about the shade on the moon and talk about some thermal stuff, to focus on that for a minute. So on Earth, you keep all of your systems nice and cool by blowing air across them. On the moon, we don't get that opportunity. So we have to run fluids. Now let's talk about Earth. Earth, you go from cold to, kind of understand what cold is, 0 degrees C to hot. I think of hot as 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of you guys out there can do the math to 80, 90 degrees, 100 degrees in Houston. But on the moon, it goes from minus 270 degrees Fahrenheit to plus 270 degrees Fahrenheit. Huge swings in temperature without the ability to have an environment to blow air across all your components. So for you Celsius people out there, I think that's like minus 130 to plus 130, somewhere in that range. Super, super hot, super, super cold. So all of our motors, our batteries and everything, we don't get to shut off the vehicle on the moon. We need to keep it warm bodied. So we need to run fluids, and we use heat straps and fluids, similar to how we cool engines, combustion engines here on Earth. But the thermal challenges, we use phase change in wax. We do all types of things to bring that to adapt to that environment. And that's good for Earth too. So we will use a lot of that technology and bring it down to here on Earth.
Absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. Sorry, go ahead, Norman.
My head spin, obviously, I'm thinking on behalf of our Shell Eco Marathon students here and the challenges that they have to address every year in every competition. You talked a lot about the thermal issues of cooling, but if you wanted to convert a Shell Eco Marathon vehicle to run on moon, what other things would you have to consider, and what would you have to change in your car other than the issues related with the thermal swings?
Okay, back to the environment. So your suspension on the moon is different than your suspension on Earth. So since you're a much lighter vehicle, not mass wise, but force wise, when you step on a scale on Earth, if you weigh 180 pounds, when you get to the moon, you're 1/6 of 180 pounds or 30 pounds. So your suspension doesn't have to be as robust from a weight standpoint, but you also spring way higher on the moon. So suspension is one thing. Tire pressure. So eco marathoners run on hard pan or on streets, whereas we're trying to keep rovers on the moon all the way down into the 1 psi range of trying to keep the tires at. So that's another challenge. The bone, we call them the bones on the vehicle. So the bones on the vehicle, because of gravity, need to be stronger on Earth than they do on the moon. So that's another challenge. The thermal we talked about. So those are some of those. The thermal, keep going back to that thermal problem. We have the same thermal problems on Earth. We solve them a little bit different, but those are kind of where we go. So gravity, and then I will say this though, there is one particular thing we're really concerned about at NASA that we have an entire group working on, and that is the abrasion of we call it lunar regolith, or the soil. So you can imagine this soil as taking a glass in your kitchen and just smashing it on the floor. And it breaks into all of these sharp shards. And there's no wind on the moon to tumble those shards. And when the rocks come in and hit the moon, there's no wind to tumble the rocks. There's no water to tumble it and to take the sharp edges. So the rocks, and we learned this from Apollo. So all of that sand on the moon is very glass-like. It's very shardy. So that is a big challenge to keep all of that dust out of everything, all of our mechanisms and everything. So if you were converting an eco marathon vehicle to a lunar vehicle, those are kind of things that you would have to take into account.
Absolutely. It sounds like there's really a lot of diverse issues to take into account there. There are some similarities between electric vehicles here on Earth and those on the moon, but truly a lot of challenges to be overcome. Before we move on, I just want to mention that Norman and I have been getting to have such a great time asking Lucien all of our questions. But one of the incredible things about this event today is that you, our Shell Eco Marathoners, also get to ask your questions to Lucien. So please head on over to menti.com and type your questions on menti.com. You can see at the bottom of the screen as well is the code that you can use to access our particular portion of Menti. Please send us your questions. We'll have a time at the end where Lucien will be happy to answer as many of those as we can get to. So for our next question, one of the things that Shell Eco Marathon students are really encouraged to think about is to think outside of the box and to challenge the status quo of what's been done before and how previous things have been done. Lucien, can you share an interesting story from your very interesting past and career where you've had to defy conventional thinking, maybe one of those aha or light bulb moments where an interesting feature or solution has been developed for a problem?
Yeah, there've been a lot of them, and let me think. But this is super. This is what engineering kind of is all about: is thinking out of the box. So I've got one that really has transformed how we think of mobility. So back in the early 2000s, probably when many of our guests out there were just being born, is we sat in a room with a bunch of high school students on the Robonauts. And they came into the room that day. I remember it well. They said, what if our robot went sideways and we had these wheel modules that made them go sideways, crab? And there had been a couple of robots that they had seen somewhere. And we as mentors just looked at them like, what are you talking about? They kind of explained it. And then they gave the advantages of, if we could do this, we could get to this position on the field. So that was the day and led into that night that we started developing what we call the crab module for high school robotics. And so the Robonauts developed this crab module. We called it the Revolution module. And it was super cool. We weren't the inventor of it, but we developed it to a super high level. And as you see on the screen right now, that has translated into crab modules that go on all of our lunar rovers. So you see a little bit of these independent steers on Mars, like on Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity. The front and back wheels spin, but the middle wheel stays straight. So it can't really crab. But if you made the middle wheel spin independently, then you could crab sideways. So that was an aha moment that the students had that has translated into really cool things at NASA. So the rover that's going to the moon in 2023, Viper, it will have the ability to crab. So you say, well, what is all of this crab? What is it for? And you saw in some of the videos where you can get out of really tough situations with the crab module. But for Viper, we are going to have a solar array that's on the back of the vehicle, and we can traverse down the lunar South Pole and keep our solar array pointed at the sun all the time. So we call it positive energy going into the batteries. Whereas if we didn't have the ability to crab, you would be pointing away from the sun with your solar array all the time, and you would use up a lot of energy, and you couldn't get energy while you were roving. So that it has continued to develop. The new ground test unit that we're developing at NASA has these crab modules, and they're all thanks to one night in 2000, 2001, 2002, somewhere in there, 20 years ago, when some students said, what if? And and I would encourage all the eco marathoners, when somebody comes in the room and they are energetic about the what if, then listen to them and embrace them. Because if you have the what if and you have the energy behind the what if to bring something to life and to prototype and to develop that, magical things really can happen. And we all know, we all have examples, back to the computer, back to the cell phone. Somebody had that what if moment and just ran with it. So I think the crab modules are pretty cool.
Absolutely. And Lucian, one thing that I really think was coming through in your response there was this idea that nothing is actually ever impossible. All it takes is someone who's able to think of it, and then people who are willing to chase after that idea and really put in the effort and the outside of the box thinking to look at something that otherwise might have seemed unrealistic or undoable and say, but what if? What if we try? What if we think about this in a different way? Is that something that you see
Yep.
a lot in NASA and especially in the robotics portion?
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. The what if factor. Just imagine the person who walked in the room and said, "What if we flew this rocket up and then we landed the boosters on a barge in the middle of the Atlantic?" What if that person was ignored? It would change the world, right? So yeah, we have a lot of those what if moments, and those are the fun. Those are really the fun moments. If you squash those moments, it's not nearly as fun or productive as that. So it is all over NASA, and we do what ifs all the time.
Absolutely. And I have to say that my favorite what if moment in the past from NASA was definitely the sky crane maneuver. But I think I'm going to have to revise that opinion now, and I'm going to have to add crabbing robots and rovers
Oh,
to
I,
my list of top favorite what if moments.
Abby, I think I'm gonna keep the what if moment with the sky crane there. So we were at the first robotics championships. I think we were in Atlanta, and the Dave Lavery, who's in charge of a lot of the Mars missions up at headquarters, he sat Rob and I down. Rob Ambrose. Rob Ambrose is probably one of the foremost roboticists in the entire world. So we were sitting down to dinner, and he said, "What do y'all think if we were to do this, crane the rover down onto Mars, and then jettison off into that?" And that was, we heard about it that night, and we were like, "Dave, that's crazy." and then a couple years later, there it was. Because the airbags were definitely, for the students out there that are like, sky crane airbags, what are you talking about, Mars? Go do some research. It is pretty cool as to the evolution of how they came up with, oh, let's just do this sky crane. So yeah, so I think
Absolutely.
it should
That's
stay number
absolutely a
one for you,
video. It's
Abby.
absolutely, thank you. It's absolutely a video worth watching. It's way too much for us to get into right now, but I agree that any Shell Eco marathoners who are watching, who don't know about Sky Crane should go and watch that video. It's incredible. Norman, I think that you had a question that you wanted to ask Lucian as well.
Well, I've been scribbling feverishly away, Lucien, here in lots of ideas for new Shell Eco Marathon challenges, and we like to make it a little bit more difficult for our students every year. So I've learned a lot that the thermal issues on the moon are probably a different challenge. That the suspension, the weight related issues are a challenge for the students. The glass like sand is an issue for the tires, but also for components to get into. Now, one thing Shell Eco Marathon students always struggle with is, get the driver up to skill, to be an absolutely perfect, energy efficient driver, staying according to the route plan, to the driving plan. What challenges would be related to the driver on the moon? As in, if I got up there, tried to got into my Shell Eco Marathon car, What would I have to think about if I wanted to drive on the moon, being a human being, not a robot?
Okay. Before I answer that, I would like to answer the three pillars of success. I would like so when we compete, we have these three pillars of success. We call it the robot, which in your case is your vehicle, the execution, which is the U factor. And it's not just the driver, it's the pit crew, it's fixing your vehicle. It's all of those things that the people have to execute. And then there's the strategy, exactly what line you take, how you use your energy, the strategy when you're on the track. So those same three pillars of robotics competitions probably apply directly to you guys. Now, let's talk about how you drive well on the moon. So, number one, in the unpressurized rover, you're in a spacesuit. That's super difficult in the way. We were just talking. We were looking at a prototype yesterday where it looks like you should be able to step on the rover, but the spacesuit physically, the joints on the spacesuit will not allow you to pick your foot up high enough to get on the deck. So you have to lower the deck. It makes you, when you're in the prototype spacesuits, it makes you look like not too smart that you just can't pick up your leg another half an inch. And you're like, hey guys, I just can't pick it up anymore. So we were talking about that. So what you do and what you should do in Eco Marathon is you should get to a point where we are training people all the time. So as soon as we can, we use a prototype or a test unit and we start training drivers. We start understanding what it takes to have what we call crew accommodations, get in the spacesuit, get on the vehicle, getting inside the vehicle, like the urban eco marathon where you have such a limited space to get in the vehicle. We have the same problem where you're squeezing onto vehicles with these. They had the problem in Apollo. We have a problem there. So we do a bunch of testing, but one of the back to the gravity that you mentioned just a second ago, it is super difficult to take a real spacesuit that weighs hundreds and hundreds of pounds and ask an astronaut to get in that suit on Earth and then start climbing on vehicles and stuff, because it weighs 1/6 of what it does on the moon. It weighs much less. So we do some of that in the big swimming pool at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, where we put crew members in suits and then we put them in there. But you can't really drive vehicles in the bottom of a pool. So you kind of piecemeal it and put astronauts in spacesuits. You let them climb onto rovers in the pool. So you kind of get the rovers. And then the old hand controllers. You got a nice steering wheel. We have a lot of, so the gloves, and we do a bunch of glove box testing where you put your hand in a spacesuit glove. And what it does is it acts like a balloon. It wants to spread your fingers apart. So it's hard to squeeze all day long on that. So we have to make the hand controllers such that we're using primarily the wrist ring to punch buttons and stuff. So you can't just go down the road holding a steering wheel. So we have lots of challenges, and it is a whole science to have crew accommodations on it. And then you bounce around a lot. And then the bottom line is the vehicle tries to throw you off like a bronc buck. So it's fun. It's exciting.
Sounds like for the time being, we'll keep the Shell Eco Marathon another year or two in Earth-bound competition before we go into that. Abby, I think you had another question for Lucien.
Absolutely. So, Lucien, we have seen so much exciting news from NASA recently, but here at Shell Eco Marathon, we'd like to get your perspective and hear from you about what else we can expect to see from your department at NASA really over the next couple of months and maybe even years.
Yeah,
Tell us all your secrets.
Like I said before, we have an engineering group working right now to put together the engineering test unit for Viper, that is an unmanned rover going to the moon in 2023. Right next to that, we're building up a lunar terrain vehicle ground test unit, where we're starting to explore what the human rover, the unpressurized human rover, which means spacesuits like Apollo, what it looks like. And we had a recently we had a super huge announcement where we went out to industry and we're asking industry, and it's not just, it's industry, academia, students like the eco marathoners. You can even participate in it. It's called a request for information about the rovers. We published something just at the end of last month, and we're asking, we give 30 days to get comments back on this request for information. And you can Google it. You can just Google NASA LTV, Lunar Terrain Vehicle, RFI, request for information, and you'll find some links that link you to this document. It's a short document, 7 or 8 pages, but there's one table in that document that I would encourage everybody on this call, on this presentation, to go look at. And that is a table that explains what we're looking for. And we're looking for to traverse 20-degree slopes. We know that the area at the South Pole is similar to the Apollo 16 terrain. So we have a lot of data on Apollo 16 out there. So how do we traverse the South Pole terrain? Then tackle the survive the night. So we expect the vehicle we're asking for is, we need it to survive 36 hours. If you go to the equator, you need 14 days. If you're up at the pole, at the South or North Pole, then you get almost constant sunlight, but you dip into these darknesses. And like I said, it goes to minus 130 degrees in that. We want to live in permanently shattered craters, which is super cold, minus 130 degrees Celsius, for up to 2 hours. So that's all in that table. It's really cool information to kind of like be like part of it. And everyone with the internet, everybody can be part of it. It's super cool. So we're doing a lot of good things. We're sending astronauts back to the moon in 2024-ish time frame. So astronauts will be there. There'll be a rover. Many of you eco marathoners out there will be on the teams that design and build the rovers. We're doing something super cool with having commercial entities actually build and operate the rovers on the moon, similar to what we've done with the commercial crew that returns crew to the space station, also the commercial lander for the moon. So you're part of the next generation of space. I know a lot of us were disappointed when we shut down the fleet of shuttles to get to where we are today, but it's been all worth it, because we needed to shut down the shuttle so we would have the funds to be able to do other great things.
That's so exciting, and I could continue listening to you both asking these questions, but we have questions incoming from our audience thick and fast, and I would to take the opportunity to remind you, if you have questions for Lucien or for Abby, please type them in to menti.com. You see the code on the screen or into the comment box on YouTube, and let's get started then, and I'll take them from the top as they come along. Lucien, the first question that our viewers are asking is, are there any technologies that you are aware of that have been developed for the lunar rover that are being applied or going to be applied to commercial vehicles now or in future?
Okay. Yes. So the modular robotic vehicle was done with a partnership with a large automotive company, and that little vehicle, and if you Google MRV, NASA MRV, you'll see the wheel modules do that. So that vehicle led to a lot of technology. So one of the big challenges on vehicles is when there is a crash, you have the steering column. And you want to get rid of that steering column. So you kind of want to go to a steer-by-wire. So to get to steer-by-wire, you have to have a lot of redundancy in that vehicle, because you don't want to be going around a turn and lose your steering and run off into a ditch. So you need a lot of redundancy. Guess who knows a lot about redundancy? the shuttles were all fly-by-wire. So when we proposed, it was a what if moment. What if the shuttles are fly-by-wire back in the 70s? Now every plane you walk on is fly-by-wire, and we have all of the redundancies. So that's flown into airplanes, literally. And now, similarly with steering, we need fly-by-wire steering for all of these vehicles. Some of them are starting. Some of the automotive companies are starting to figure it out. We've been part of that and helping figure that out. So that's one of the technologies. The crab modules. Billy Casey and I were just down at Disney World, and we hold the patent. NASA holds the patent along with our industry partner of these wheel modules, these crab wheel modules on the MRV. And they actually, Disney came and visited us, and when you walk into the Minnie and Mickey Runaway Railroad, they use that technology in the cars and on the entertainment side. So that was kind of cool to see. So
yeah,
those are a
great.
couple of technologies.
And here's a question from one of our viewers that really intrigues me and goes back to my thinking about Shell Eco Marathon. Of course, in Shell Eco Marathon, it's not about who crosses the finish line first, certainly not for the mileage challenge, but who goes the distance with the least amount of energy. How significant is energy efficiency for the lunar rover? And is that a concern for you at all? Or do you just go along and make it work?
Well, yes, it is not only a concern, it is energy density in batteries are our number one concern. So we fund a lot of the battery, trying to increase the energy density in batteries, because that means that the more power dense a battery is, the less we have to launch, which launch in mass is a big deal. And it means the more power we have on the moon. And just like you all know, the vehicle weighs less, right? So there are huge benefits to having more power density. That's why lithium-ion batteries have been a big boost. There's some technology out there that is advancing the lithium-ion batteries. So that's super good technology that we're doing. We had that discussion last night as to what we think when the rovers go to the moon, how energy dense will our batteries be? And it all goes into survive the night too. So I talk about this 36 hours to survive the night. What you basically do on the moon is you get to a location and you say, okay, I have to survive the night. You get into this kind of curled up position where you have all of your MLI and you're about to get super cold. And then you have heaters all over the vehicle where you have to use your battery power to heat these heaters, and you have a heat leak out of the vehicle. So you're hoping the batteries, with simulation and math, is you always got to do the math. Remember that. Is you're trying to survive the night with the amount of energy you have in your batteries. And if you run out of batteries, your vehicle's done. Your 10-year vehicle that you needed on the moon has just died because you had a tear in the MLI. So there's a lot of challenges. Survive the night and energy density really scares us a lot, and we put a lot of resources to it, which is exactly what you guys are doing, is trying to get every ounce of energy out of your vehicles and your batteries. So it is super related to what we do.
Thanks, Lucien. So another question that our viewers are asking of you more personally: what is the single most important or exciting project that you worked on in your career?
I would say it's probably hard to choose, but I can give you a couple. So
right.
Robonaut was a big project. Like I alluded to, we started that in the 90s, and then we had Robonaut 2 that went to space station that was literally the first humanoid that ever went to space. So back in the 90s, about 2000, there was one humanoid. Now all of these companies are building humanoids. It's super exciting. So we had the first humanoid that was in space, and actually Robonaut 2 will probably end up in the Smithsonian soon, because it has returned from the space. But then the rovers that I'm in the middle of, President Bush, announced we're going back to the moon. They tapped on the robotics division at NASA to say, hey, we need a rover that is robotic, because we know when the crew's there, they have to drive it. But when the crew is away, which is like 360 days out of the year, we have to drive it robotically. It's got to be smart. We have to teleoperate. That first rover that we built actually was the final element in President Obama's first inauguration. So President Bush said we're going to the moon. We had it in front of President Obama. Super good. We're going to the moon. We have a lot of momentum. So I think in the end that rover for the moon is going to be a super project. But like I told you before, with my mother and father instilling service and building in me. So I grew up in a gravel company around a bunch of heavy equipment. So the building thing was big, but service to others was big. And the Robonauts, I would say probably the proudest moment is 25 years of mentoring all of these high school students, 60 students a year. So we have, 15 or 20 new students a year coming on the team. You get to mentor them. You get to see them grow up, go through college. And look, so that ground test unit that we're building right now, the frame is built by Heaven and Madison are building the frame. They're interns that went through was on a robotics team. The person who's doing suspension, he's at college as an intern, was on a high school robotics team. The suspension robotics team. Steering is our only engineer that's doing that won on a robotics team. So I think growing the next generation of engineers all the way back to the elementary level has been super satisfying.
Well, so it is clear to see that being part of an engineering program like the Shell Eco Marathon prepares you truly for so many challenges in your professional career. I'm really pleased to hear you confirming this. And we have a lot of our practitioners on the call, and here's one very hands-on question. What motors do you use in the lunar rover? What can we learn from the motor technology that you're using?
So we use rare earth brushless DC motors. So for you a little bit older, in our lives, there usually are brushed motors. So if you picked up a drill, a cordless drill 15 years ago, it had a brush motor in it. Now they are brushless motors. And what we do is, you can think of us more as roboticists. You can think of us more as integrators than we are developers of like motor technology. So we buy off the shelf what we call frameless brushless motors, where the rotor and the stator are separated, come in two different boxes. You build the structure around them, and then you integrate it into yours. So we use frameless brushless motors, and then we use off-the-shelf motor controllers. So you add power, and then they basically invert that DC power into the three phases of the brushless motor, and it makes the motor go round and round. And those brushless motors have become super popular, and you can literally get them everywhere now with the motor controllers. And look, there are mechanical, electrical, software, controls type engineers. They're all needed to build a rover, and it is a good time to be studying engineering and to be part of the Eco Marathon, because it's hard to find engineers right now to build rovers.
Well, that's almost a perfect final word, but we're not quite there yet. We still have lots of questions coming in. And if you want to ask your question to Lucien, go to menti.com, ask your question. I'm very happy to read it out here and pass it on. One question here, more to the future plans of NASA after Ingenuity. Where will the next controlled flight mission of NASA be?
So we're focusing on the moon and Mars. So JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory out in California, it's talking about Dave Lavery and crew. They're working on Mars. So they have a return. They're collecting samples right now on Mars. They had the Ingenuity helicopter on Mars. So they will have another flight, but we have a sample return on Mars. So the next helicopters on Mars will become very popular. On the moon, no rotary vehicles on the moon like that because there's no atmosphere. But we do on the moon, we're focusing on human space flight. That's going to be our proving ground for Mars. So we'll have Artemis, the Artemis project. You can think of Artemis like you did Apollo. Is Artemis? We will be flying humans back to the moon in 2024, 2025 timeframe. Before that, like I was saying earlier, we have Viper going. So that's another mission that we have going. That was a little bit more about what our plans are, but yeah. So rotary helicopters will be on Mars forever now.
Yes, thanks, Lucien, for answering this question. And we've got one for Abby coming. Abby, what has been your research focus lately, and what is it that you are most excited to see happening in space technology in the next few years?
Absolutely. So my research focus in the past was in astrobiology. So I have a background in astrobiology, the study of and search for extraterrestrial or alien life in our solar system. And in particular, I used to look at a specific kind of extremophile microbe that was actually able to survive under Martian conditions. And so we simulated the conditions of Mars here on Earth in order to explore how this organism was able to survive and thrive under those very trying and difficult conditions, and to use that information then to help develop and guide our search for life both on Mars and elsewhere within our solar system. That was my previous research. I'm really still invested and really still intrigued and interested by it. However, I've switched gears a little bit, and currently I am working as an immunologist at Harvard Medical School. And so during my time at Harvard Medical School, I have been particularly focusing on water quality and especially looking at inflammation and low-grade inflammation that can happen from minute contaminants within water quality, and trying to explore that. And this is really an interesting topic for a lot of reasons. It has applications here on Earth, of course, but it also has applications in space, because when we think about the human elements of some of these missions, these return missions to the moon, these first missions to Mars, and that kind of answers the second question as well, which is that I really think that one of the most exciting things that's going on in space currently is this return to the moon. It's impossible, or it's very difficult to not look at that and be really excited and inspired. But when we're thinking about returning humans to the moon or putting humans on Mars for the first time, the human issues do start to become very pressing. And one of those issues, of course, is life support systems. Having adequate water filtration devices and the ability to really conserve all of these resources that you bring with you, as well as to potentially utilize some of the in situ resources that you might be able to find, such as finding ice on the moon and then using it. However, currently we don't have quite that technology tested, so we have to really utilize everything that we bring with us, including our water sources. And so it's really fun and incredible to be working in water contamination and water quality control right now.
Thanks, Abby.
So Norman, I would like to add a couple words to that. So number one, everyone, Abby is super, super smart. Number two is we're trying with Viper, we're actually going into the permanently shattered craters, drilling for what we call rock ice. is we are hoping to find the water that we can use for life support systems. So hopefully in this generation, one day we will live off of the land. So no one has ever lived off the land on another planet, and Abby is making that possible to help us live off the land, on the moon, and hopefully Mars one day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Lucien, and it's
thanks
really
for
so
the build on
exciting to
that.
have those. Yeah, to have that be our future in space right now, and to have these systems working together of both living off of the land and utilizing what we have there, and then also conserving those resources that we are able to in the future through missions like Viper and future developments to retrieve. It's really, I mean, I'm not sure if you can all tell, but I'm overflowing with excitement and joy for what the future of human space exploration and robotic space exploration looks like.
Yes, and thank you very much, and your enthusiasm, and you can clearly see you're very thrilled, and I mean it is a topic that I'm sure will keep us and many more people very engaged and very committed for years to come, and we will, I'm sure, have many discoveries that will also aid us here on Earth at some point in time. But here's another question from clearly our SEM practitioners, teams that are participating in Shell Eco Marathon. They're very interested and very concerned about the aerodynamics of their car and how to make the car more efficient by improving aerodynamics. Now, clearly, with the so different atmosphere or non-existent atmosphere on the moon, how does aerodynamics translate into a moon rover, Lucien?
So aerodynamics, or the lack of in our case, makes lunar rovers look really, let's just be honest, ugly. So since we don't have two things on the moon that are a huge advantage, wind resistance and rain. So as we take some of our test units out to the desert, we're out there testing in the deserts of Arizona, and it it rains. And when it rains, we just cover up the rovers because we look at everybody and say, hey, it doesn't rain on the moon. So aerodynamics wise, we don't get the benefit of aerodynamics to be able to have air to blow across our systems to thermally control them, but we also don't have to worry about it going down the road because there is no air resistance. So the end result is, like I was saying, doesn't make the rovers look super pretty because you can literally, I wish I could show you a picture, but I can't right now, but I can explain it. The solar array on the lunar rover that goes to the moon in 2027 is probably going to be enormous. You're probably going to look at a picture of it and be like, how could that possibly survive? It's going to blow over. No, it's not going to blow over. It looks like a big sail. It collects a lot of energy, but it's not going to blow over because there's no wind. Now, there's inertia on the moon, just like there is on Earth. So we have to worry about keeping that big sail upright and everything. But we all know we can keep a big sail upright here on Earth. So we ought to be able to figure that out. But the more sun you can collect, the more energy positive you can roll down the moon, which is a big benefit for us.
And Lucien,
Wow.
if you don't mind, I was really wondering how the answer to that question, and feel free to just quickly say a couple words on this, how the answer to that question would change if we're talking about future vehicles on Mars instead of the moon, where there actually is an atmosphere minimal, but there is more atmosphere than on the moon.
Yeah, so like on the Mars, you can't put a big sail up. It may not be as windy on Mars as it is here on Earth, but it's certainly windy and you don't want a big sail. But with that said, the atmosphere helps Mars stay kind of temperature nice, let's call it. So the people who decided to go to Mars, when JPL said, what if we just skip the moon and go to Mars? They were really smart people because temperature wise, it's really nice over there. And so it does change the vehicle, but you get a
No
bonus
more questions.
by, and you don't need to thermally control it like you do on the moon. So you don't need that much energy.
So fascinating.
Well, I could continue to listen to both of you for much, much longer, but unfortunately, we are already back at the top of the hour and we are out of time. This has been so interesting and so enlightening to listen to you. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions you send us. But sadly, that wraps up our Shell Eco Marathon virtual learning session with Lucien and astronaut Abby. A huge thank you to both of you for your time and for that great conversation.
Thank you, Norman, and especially a huge thank you to Lucien. It has been such a pleasure to get to talk with and learn from you today. And I'm also so appreciative to all of our Shell Eco Marathoners who have been joining us for this stream and have been answering such incredible questions. It was just really such a great time.
Yeah. And I'd like to echo what Abby said. Abby, it's been a pleasure. Norman, it's been a pleasure. Students, I don't have the time to recruit you here on this 1 hour, but stay in touch with NASA. We need super good engineers like you are becoming. So thank you for coming and hear us talk, and I hope to see you on a rover team real soon.
Well, fantastic. Thanks so much. And thanks for everybody for tuning in and taking part in this Shell Eco Marathon virtual learning sessions. And there are more of them to come very soon. Please check out our website of Shell Eco Marathon for more details. We'd love to having you join. Thank you very, very much and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.